Hey guys, this is take 57 for this ad read right beforehand. I did forget to put this into the episode, so I apologize for jumping in ahead like this, but we'll get to Tim's 2 cents podcast real quickly. First off, I would like to thank eToro for sponsoring the show. You can go to youmeandbtc.com/trade. And there, it's a social trading platform. They mean social because you can talk to people. You can it's not just like Coinbase where you're going in and trading and then you're kind of just separated from everybody else. You can trade, you can post messages, you can get replies from people. And they have lots of different cryptocurrencies you can use. You can go BTC, Dash, Litecoin. That's just a few. They have Ethereum that you can go out and check on all of those. And then also, the most interesting to me, or at least maybe the most exciting for an ad like this, is they have, once you log in, you make an account, you get $100,000 of virtual money. Now, it wouldn't be that nice if they just gave you everything, but you can at least kind of tell yourself that you have all this kinds of money. People say you fake it till you make it. This will help if you have $100,000 that you think are real. But what you can do with that is you can go in, you can kind of practice some trades, you can get a feel for the setup. It's a very nice setup, very sleek. Like I said, they've been around, or I'm not sure if I said it in this thing, they've been around since 2007 doing all kinds of stuff, so it's not just a flash in the pan Bitcoin business. It's kind of jumping up just to take everybody's money real quick. But they have a very nice interface, real streamlined, and that $100,000 of virtual money that you can practice within your account will let you kind of figure them out. But then also it could help you design trading strategies and just kind of get a feel for markets in general if you've never jumped into them before. So again, check them out at youmeandbtc.com/trade and jump in. Daniel and I are doing a competition with our virtual currencies. I am already definitely losing. You can join in with us with that, and you can kind of compare yourself to what Daniel and I say we're at whenever we get on the live shows and we decide to share our screens. Most likely you will beat me. I do need a few of you guys to beat Daniel, though, just so he doesn't feel so good about himself. Anyway, thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Okay, that looks good. Hopefully the sound of my laundry running in the background isn't going to intrude too much on the Tim's 2 Cents, episode 53. Daniel, that's how you introduce a show. I'm somewhat more excited than usual, mostly just because today is Labor Day, so I didn't really have to work that much. I still had to labor somewhat, whatever that counts for. I guess that makes me a better person than everybody that got a day off. But I also have multiple sponsors now, kind of. Mount Baker Vapor, I'm still kind of plugging them a little bit. They don't really have the kind of selection that I liked in the juices now. I hate that I'm talking about that. I feel like my grandfather would just be disgusted by me. Well, you get these different juices, and I don't really like how they really kind of mix them anymore. They don't have it the exact way that I like to inhale my e-liquid that I've vaporized on 2-week-old cotton because I don't want to change the atomizer out. Anyway, I'm still kind of putting them out. They also have a little promotion going on. I don't really get that much more money for it. I think it said 100 new hits. But whatever, I'll take a little bit more if they have some kind of not a loyalty, but an affiliate program where I get extra money if more of you guys go to tim.town/clouds, check them out, buy stuff from them there. They always have like batteries, and I think they sell mods. I've never really gotten into that, but they have tanks and everything. So do that, or I don't really care exactly how much you spend, although I guess it makes a difference, maybe. I haven't really looked into it that much. Daniel and I have more just been using this just to be able to try to gauge who's listening. So I have them. Go check them out again, tim.town/clouds. Wasn't really sure what I want to talk about. I told Daniel I'd start at least doing these every 2 weeks because whenever I can pretty much go however long I want and be like nothing has happened, but it's not like I have these big, huge events all the time happening in my life where I'm going, oh, that's crazy, I have to talk about that. So if I tell myself, oh, I don't want to do a podcast because I don't have anything to say, and this will tie in later to what I'm going to talk about, I think. I am kind of obsessed with authenticity, if that makes, without sounding too shitty like that. Like that has to come across as kind of pretentious, at least. But I've always been really, really focused and, to me, or at least I would think, hyper aware of people thinking that I'm like a real person. Like, oh, well, I don't just do things because other people do them. I have my own opinions. I like to think for myself. I like to not force emotions or stuff like that. And I want people to think that I'm real and I'm not lying to them. And I don't shy away from my more vulnerable parts. I don't want to be the guy who just talks like a tough guy all the time. I want people to know that sometimes I feel depressed and I'm sad and blah 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 blah. And so I'm saying this like you haven't already figured this out, and to me, I'm like, I'm revealing something about myself. So but I am very, and I'm clipping this a little bit now, I'm very sensitive to trying to seem like a real person, which can only really point to me not being a real person and me being completely fake, which, I mean, people say all the time, but I can definitely see that in myself, where I'm like, I can go through an entire day, talk to multiple different people, and partly because of the job I do, and partly because of just who I am, I can go through and not really say any kind of an honest word to people. Like, I don't talk to people about what's bothering me is literally, like, at least truthfully. I can always come up with something, and that's all really it seems like people want to hear in conversations, is something that you're complaining about, then I'll give you what I'm complaining about. Then we'll talk about a few good things, and then we'll kind of leave after talking about something we want to complain about. So I'll complain about the weather. That's a big one now. Part of that, though, is with the dog walking, and depending on the dog that I'm walking, it might get attention. There's two really big ones that I walk down in the outskirts of the city of Pittsburgh, and people always kind of stop and are like, what the fuck kind of dog is that? The one is an Irish wolfhound, the other one's I think like a Burmese mountain dog or some shit. But they're both big. They're both probably weigh only a little bit less than I do. The wolfhound would be taller than me on his hind legs. But yeah, people kind of always stop. So I guess everybody does this in their job if you're dealing with somebody, but I didn't always recognize it as much then. Like doing the serving stuff, I could divvy it up, or not divvy it up, but I could change things around enough where I wasn't having, like, I was literally having my own part of the conversation, the same thing, like giving like a cursory thing about the menu. Well, are you, when you're here, or basically every restaurant's thing about when you're here, your family, but Olive Garden somehow picked that. Or apparently they don't have that anymore. I don't know. I haven't been there for a while. I know I'm going off on too much of a tangent here, but there's a weird contingent of people around. It seems like they're like, no, Olive Garden's pretty good, but whatever. I've never forgiven them for not bringing more breadsticks when I was 12 and fat and not filling them up more. But yeah, what even was I talking about? But I'm very concerned about seeming legitimate and seeming honest and seeming kind of, I'm being vulnerable. I'm not hiding within myself. So that then kind of gives me an out sometimes as far as doing things like writing or doing a podcast. Right? Well, I don't want to make people think I'm just doing things to do something. I don't want to put out a story that's just me just typing away and not just on way too much caffeine, and I'm kind of just forcing something out just because I want to finish it. I don't want people to read that, or else they might think I'm just trying to entertain them or something. Like, that's kind of that's the fight I have in my head. But a lot of times I can win out and go, yeah, but you should be authentic. You should stand for something. People should respect you. And I'm like, yeah, maybe. It's also, it's not like people are going to read this is partly because I read a lot of these books, so I'm always like, no, yeah, a bunch of people read horror books. And I'm like, no, not a lot of them do. Same thing with fantasy. Like, there's a big audience for that type of stuff, but who cares? Like, nobody, you don't make that much money. Almost every single story is the same. At least fantasy, I'm assuming so. All of the synopses seem the same. I have somebody who I know who listens to a bunch of them on Audible because he's too dumb to read. But no, he actually can read. He read some weird, what the fuck was it? It's some book about a meteor coming and just smashing the earth. And it's a thriller like that. Or something like a national disaster thriller in book form, which sounds terrible to me, but whatever. But a lot of the stories are pretty similar. The art, I mean, cause you're kind of just playing to what you know your audience wants to hear, I think. Horror people have a kind of an out on that. Like, fantasy, it seems like it's pretty well known even amongst the fans. We're just like, yeah, no, I want the guy to be an outsider. I want him to be a kid. Somebody comes and destroys his village. You find out he's maybe related to somebody, or maybe there's a possibility he is, but then in the end there's this twist and he's not, and he actually doesn't have the divine right of kings to rule. And then he goes on to become king or some great sorcerer or swordsman. Horror, they're like, no, I don't, this challenges boundaries, or this really scares you. And I don't really think I could say that for very many books. Like, even good ones, even horror books that I've read multiple times. One thing horror books tend to run out, it seems like, as long as if they're conventional. I haven't finished it, but I've read most of House of Leaves. It gets less enjoyable than really, like, it's parts of it are just like, why the fuck do I have to turn this thing around to the side? I don't want to figure out a puzzle. I just want to read this dumb little story where it's mixed in with some dude that just does drugs all the time and jerks off on people. Like, just the random stories of maybe the author, and then he's going through papers about some house that has a closet or some hall that extends like a labyrinth, and it's just very strange. I mean, it's cool whenever I'm in the mood for it, but it's not something I can finish to. It's so long too that I'm sure some people have finished in a days. I've finished some books in days. Now, those are normally like 80-page novellas. I like, and that is, as another aside, I know I'm going on way too many tangents for this one, but I think as far as horror goes, definitely the best length is a novella, or at least a long short story. I would, for fantasy again, or any of these other kind of, what do they even call them? There's a word for it. Not pulp fiction, but there's a word for kind of just these writers just kind of churn out stories. There's not supposed to be some overarching message. It's just like Stephen King, where it's not so much a exploration. See, this sounds so pretentious, but it's not necessarily that much. The story and the expression of these books isn't that much different from a movie. It's just you're describing it. That's why they work well as audiobooks. I mean, other things work well as audiobooks too. They're not always bad, But the reason why they're so good for audiobooks is because it's just like listening to a radio play or something like that. Not necessarily that there's actors, but, and again, I'll use Stephen King as an example because a long time ago I procured a file of all of the audiobooks of his from like 72. I don't know when exactly he started, but from like the time of like The Shining to Salem's Lot, like I think early to mid 70s is whenever it starts, and it goes to like 2006. I haven't listened to everything, but I've listened to quite a bit. I've listened to probably 13 of his books. I've read 4. I've listened to a couple and read some. Because again, they're really good to cut grass to for 10 hours a day or to drive around to, because you're not listening to it necessarily for the language either. You're not listening to it for it to be witty, or it's not like Bukowski, which again, I haven't read. Or a better example would be, it's not Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, where it's not so much the story you're concerned with. That is part of it, but that's kind of secondary to this author's flair, or this author's voice, or this character's voice. It's not like that. It's not like Chuck Palahniuk stuff, which is similar to, it's not so much about a personal flair as, well, it is a personal flair, but it's not in the kind of, it's in this just like visceral expression that you can't do in something like a movie. Horror, or which I would say most Stephen King stuff isn't necessarily horror. Again, I have a problem with the novels because it just seems like it runs out. They're more just thrillers, because the fear is more from just some bad thing happening. The fear isn't this kind of, it's the fear of something bad happening or the reaction to something bad happening. So in a Stephen King book, the fear is, this is a hotel, the son is having nightmares, and he is kind of, he can kind of read his parents' thoughts, and they've had problems in the past. Everyone's always a drunk in these stories, or a dry drunk, or a whatever. And the horror comes from that. The horror comes from these past stories that the father reads and finds about mafia killings there, and then the kid is seeing ghosts, and eventually the father goes insane. I know I'm putting out a lot of book spoilers here. Or like Salem's Lot, where it's just, well, there's vampires in New England. Boo. But there's not so much, or there's not really any of just a feeling of dread, or, which I think you can do in novellas. One, because it's you can read those. A novella, I would say you can read in, well, actually, maybe this is why I need to change this. Not necessarily a novella. I don't know how to describe these exactly, because it's something in between a short story and a novella. Because most of the time, I got a Kindle when I was like 17. I didn't talk to anybody. I was very, not lonely, but I liked to read at 17. So, but I was old enough to where I'd read Stephen King stuff. So I was like, horror, let's go to other things. Let's go to, like, Tim Curran. I bought, if you've ever heard of him, which you probably haven't, because that's like pulp horror books. Just like Monsters in the Sea, a lot of Cthulhu and Lovecraft rip-off stuff, but entertaining. He does like Western horror sometimes, but a lot of that is just, again, especially reading a lot of his books, you just see the same repeated line, because horror, most of the time in these books, like I'm saying, is just describing a smell over and over again, and you read the same description of a noxious, bubbling offal. It smells of an offal pit. And because of the Kindle, you can just switch through. I have the oldest, most basic version too. It was like $60 back in 2013. Or 50 maybe? Maybe that's actually sounds like a lot of money. It was before 2000, it was like 2009. But it still runs. I have a few pixels that don't work on it. But there's dictionaries, so you switch through there and you can see it. Like, oh, well, this is another word for putrescence. And it's a lot of that. And Stephen King, I would say, is much better at doing a movie type experience where everything's kind of shown. If the smell does come up, it's not completely dwelt on. It's kind of just mentioned because you can do that. The inner dialogue always seems like it always has something to do with, or not, fuck that, seems like, I'm telling this story. It always has something to do with a past memory, a kind of vision. It's rarely just them thinking about the problem. It's a dream, blah, 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 it's whatever. Tim Curran and a lot of other horror authors who aren't necessarily as successful because they like to continuously use words that most people in Walmart are not going to be able to understand. I'm not saying that as I understand. I'm saying that as if I'm constantly looking these things up because it's some obscure 19 or 1850s term for spoiled meats or like spoiled cadavers, the average person watching through Walmart is not going to even want to look at this. They're going to see a Stephen King book and be like, ooh, it's spooky. This is just going to be gore stuff to them, which is interesting because Tim Curran, out of these guys, there's kind of like layers to how obscure the person is, and as you get more obscure in certain directions, you normally get more graphic. So a lot of Tim's current stuff is just describing very gory things, and again, what I'm talking about with the smells, just an obsession with focusing on miasmas and blah, blah, blah. But it's entertaining. I like it. It's my kind of writing. I like horror anthologies and crime anthologies. Not really the older crime. I made a mistake one time and bought an anthology, and it was like the 1950s serial type detective stories. I was like, this is just bad. I don't care for this at all. But I like more modern stuff. Again, I can't help sounding pretentious about any of this, and I keep making that excuse, like it matters if I mention it or not. Like, I'm going to be like, well, they heard me say that I'm acknowledging I'm being pretentious, so that means it's okay if I'm being pretentious. Anyway, a lot of these stories, I'm not really sure where I was going as far as that, but a lot of those, the horror stories, the crime stories, they follow a certain kind of pattern that is pretty easy to follow. It's a structure. They have their fans who kind of want a certain thing. You get the short stories I like because they offer some more variety. One, you're not doing the same story for 100,000 words or more. Maybe like 10,000, 15,000. I think I was mentioning that before, where I wasn't sure what to call, because the author that I was most recently into as far as horror was Laird Barron, and he has like anthology books that are, I don't know how long they are in print, probably 330 pages, but there's 6 short stories in there. So most of these short stories have to be 25,000 words, something like. They take like an hour and a half, 2 hours, which a novella, to me, takes like 4 or 5. I don't know. Whatever you read. Maybe I'm a slow reader. I probably am. But I like that length because, one, it gives you the variety, and two, you can start that off immediately exploring. Sorry, I thought I was going to burp. You can start that off immediately inside of a character's head and then just dig further from that. Like, you can, because I would imagine, and I've tried, and I'm screaming again, because the biggest thing I've written so far has been 80,000 words. I think it might be long. It might be 100. No, I don't think I got that high, but it's at least 80,000 words, and it's my attempt at writing, I don't know what I would call it, like interpersonal horror, because it's all of it is, I mean, there's obviously an overarching occult thing going on, but most of it and most of the writing is just these interactions between characters and not trusting each other and kind of backstabbing each other, or maybe not, but maybe unintentionally doing it, slighting people, and just every single different chapter, which would be, they weren't super long chapters. Some of them would be, they'd be, 4 to 5, Google Documents pages. So maybe 3,000 words each, maybe a little bit more. I've never really paid attention to the exact amounts. For a while, I was just I would do like 1,000 to 2,000 words a day. And when I wasn't working that much, I would just go to a coffee shop, drink 2 cups of coffee, start to have a panic attack and write. And I would just churn out 1,000 words while I listened to Spotify offline. I didn't use Wi-Fi at coffee shops for the first 3 months I went to them in the last winter. And then now I start to, and all it does is distract me, because then I start looking up words or looking up whatever. But I would just hammer out that many words, and it's not good, it's not entertaining, and it's kind of exhausting. And it's exhausting to write because you're trying to have a separate, a separate voice for each character, and trying to focus on that for that long, it kind of runs out, because you can only go over why this certain character is depressed that his friend killed himself so many times, while you're trying to work to a conclusion that doesn't seem to me, I couldn't really figure out how to make it make sense. But when I read these other books, it doesn't seem like it should matter, because you're just where did this monster come from? Why is it here? Why has it just sat in the middle of Michigan for the past 2,000 years? Whatever. So, maybe I'll finish it. I still keep this. It's not like I delete the things, because I know there's some kind of a story there. I know there's something. But whenever I start quitting things and breaking off from them, it does help sometimes. Like that very story, I think I wrote the first time, I wrote probably 6 to 7 pages. I introduced the 4 main characters, kind of gave them a little bit of a backstory each, differentiated them, had them kind of separate, whatever. And then I left it for a month and a half, 2 months, because I got really busy with landscaping, and I was just writing I had another story. This is one I did record, that I kind of started writing because I just wanted to do something shorter, and then that got bigger and bigger. I eventually finished that one. But when I came back to this thing, I could write it again. It kind of went for a while, and then it just stopped one time, and then I started looking back, and I was like, well, if I can't write anymore, I can at least start editing this mess. And then I was just like, well, this isn't even interesting. Who cares about, after this many pages, after whatever 80, 90 Google Documents pages, and then there's another 30 for you to continue reading, why do you care about this guy anymore, about his feelings, whatever? And I can use the excuse that, well, this doesn't mean anything. And again, it's like, well, I'm probably not going to see this thing as anything particularly amazing, because I try to work on that. I try to be more, not necessarily positive, but not conquering, no, not trying to go out of my way to denigrate myself, or to, trying to be, you can do that. You can do whatever. Most things that people get good at is because they spend thousands and thousands and thousands of hours practicing and being shitty at it, and then they get a little better, and then they feel shitty about it again. And I know everybody says that, and plenty of people make the mistake of telling themselves stuff like this and then just continuing to fall into nothingness as they make new chill step tracks in their bedroom, and they have 3 followers who are like, yeah, man, this is great. This is good. You're good on you for not giving up and giving in and selling out. I will sell out immediately. That's all probably what I'm banking on is I start putting things out, and somehow I need to get the money to just start printing stuff and then just dump it all over the world and just flood the world with these books. And it'd be so bad and so obnoxious to read and painful and way too detailed that people would just pay me not to write things. I would be completely fine. I'd do it in secret up in like the attic. I'd just write on pen to paper. I'd write stories and then people would find, and I'm sorry, I'm really rambly with this one, but I wanted to talk about something kind of different than dying, I think is again what I did last week. But yeah, I guess most of this episode has been me just kind of trying to convince myself to keep writing stuff. I actually do have a new thing, which doesn't really mean that much. I have probably over 100 just drafts of things they're in various states. Some of them have like a page and a half. Some of them have 20 pages. Some of them have 12. That's kind of all over besides the 80,000 one. Because, pretty much anytime I can have a laptop, I can write, and I have in the past. I've been doing this for several years now. So I just have all of these things. Maybe I'm just trying to convince myself to be able to just put those out. But I don't think you should have to worry about, this shouldn't be advice. I guess. Because I guess this is still just me talking to myself. Because it's basically what this podcast is. Do whatever. I've definitely said stuff like that before, but do whatever. Do whatever you want. If you want to just make money on stuff, I don't like that we go, well, that person, they're not really experiencing life. Or people use that excuse for why they're like, well, I just feel bad for Christians because they don't get what they're just wasting their lives before they go to just die. Like nothing matters anyway. So they're going to give up their at least supposed happiness to have yours while you drink and brunch on a Sunday and Monday this week because it's Labor Day. So you found that one place that strangely has signs about supporting laborers, but then also has them coming and work because they're just such good parts of the family. It's a real family business and everybody comes together. Anyway, yeah, I'm just rambling at this point. I thought I was going to be able to talk for a while and I have more notes, but all of that's just like, well, what do I think horror should be? Should it be blah, blah, blah? And it's like, it doesn't matter. I have kind of just talked about books this whole time, so I guess I should finish off with something. I don't know. Life's been pretty fine. It's not life kind of just does that anyway, I think, where you kind of just get adjusted to something. I do feel like I'm kind of coming out of something. I don't get seasonal. I don't get seasonal depression, but I definitely go through. And it's not like the causes are unknown. They're actually very easily diagnosed, which is part of what's made them easier to deal with. So I don't go into these things. Part of it, when I was younger, it was because I'd work in the summer and then be off then, and then just sit there and kind of go a little crazy because at the same time as I was kind of getting out of that mindset, I was still in the Puritan, like, hard work is good, suffering is good, you should be hating most of your day because then God will reward you later. I mean, that was definitely the reason. The most recent ones, again, are very easily diagnosed, but I won't mention that now. I'm sure Daniel, if he listened to this, will probably text me. Now that he's heard me say this, he definitely has to text me. I mean, nothing serious, but I don't remember if I ever said this on there. The weeks before Daniel's wedding, and there was a kind of there was a clashing of, there was a culmination of events. So, if any of you have, well, yeah, never mind. I was just dreaming more during that time, right up, preceding Daniel's wedding. So, I've been on a plane 6 times now, or it had been on the plane 6 times before I went to Daniel's wedding. But all I can really do is worry about not waking up on time in the morning before plane, because the idea of losing that much money, which I've lost that much money before. I've lost more than that a plane ticket before. But the idea of just sleeping for an extra hour and so then having to buy another $500 plane ticket is, I guess, horrifying to me, because for several weeks beforehand, I would wake up in the middle of the night with my heart just, and I'd be like, what was I forgot my suit. That was what the fuck it was. And just feeling like this utter shame. I don't know, I guess again, being like, I want people to think that I care about them or something. I don't know. So I have a tendency to blow things out of proportion and just, which I prefer to just going, oh, everything will be fine. We'll just, and it doesn't really matter what the person believes who says that, because it seems like everything else they believe kind of just caters to that. Where, I mean, I get that from atheists, from Christian, I get that from everybody, where everybody's just like, it'll all be fine. It just works out. And so, why? What is, either way, either if you believe in God or not, I mean, it's pretty easy to see that for the vast amount of history, if we're trusting history at all, has not been good things and has not been happy times for everybody, where we didn't just have to worry about dying most days. And people, well, you do now, because statistically, shootings happen more now. I say, okay, but I don't know about statistically. I've seen all kinds of statistics and all kinds of statistics. This is why I can't do higher math, because I refuse to say the class name. Statistics that contradict each other and go against each other, because you're not doing a statistics of every single test that has ever been done. You're doing statistics of a certain test of a certain group of individuals of whatever age group, and they're changing this for everyone, so that you can go, no, there's more shootings now, no, there's less shootings now, no, same thing with health stuff. Like, just stop, don't pay attention to breaking medical studies, because I probably even mentioned this before, just I have a certain dislike for doctors, and their administrations that cost me thousands of dollars to tell me nothing, and to the rest of the time go, have you taken ibuprofen? And I go, yes, for 2 weeks. Well, take it for another 3 weeks. If your back doesn't stop hurting as a 13-year-old child, then you can come back in, make a new appointment. We know your mom works pretty much every single day, but she'll have to take another day off that she has to schedule 2 months in advance. And also, if you cancel any time, we also would need some money, because I need to pay back the bills that I got, because I had to pay for medical school now. So a little bit of a bias I have there, definitely, against doctors. Maybe that's what I should write about, is evil doctors. Yeah, so I don't know, besides that, I did an overnight stay with a dog the other day, or on Saturday, which is Saturday to Sunday, which was yesterday. A big dog that I've seen him before. He's sweet, but I was sitting on the couch. I had my computer or the Chromebook out, and I was watching. There's a video game production. I don't know if it's a guy or a team, but it's called Puppet Combo, and he does like old style horror games. So like think PS1 graphics. And he puts out like a bunch. This is another thing where I'm talking about like some people, and I guess you maybe have to decide who you're going to be and what you're going to stand for if you're going to stand for something. But I think there's nothing impossible about doing both, between, like, as far as video games go, one person wants to make Spec Ops The Line, which is probably a major company's best expression of like a story, like if you've seen it, Apocalypse Now, which I would say I don't really like too many movies as far as watching them multiple times. I've watched Apocalypse Now multiple times. It's good. It's long enough that you do have to kind of sit in for it, but I can also watch an hour of a movie kind of over a couple different days. But the viewpoint of that and kind of a disillusionment with the U.S. being the force of good in all of its conflicts, and all of their operatives are also perfect and amazing, and we don't ever pillage or murder people. We only defend things. And Spec Ops The Line, I don't remember who made it, but it was kind of famous for, and again, more spoilers for stuff, but it was kind of famous for, it's a third-person shooter, kind of like Gears of War, but it's set in modern times, maybe a little, not really any future. In Dubai, there's a sandstorm that hits this place. There's U.S. soldiers in there, blah, 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 special ops, Spec Ops The Line. 3 operatives go in, they start seeing a bunch of stuff, people dying, but whatever. What happens throughout the thing, eventually, you kind of have to, the character or whatever, they kind of confront a point in the game where they made a decision, they've committed a war crime. And just like, well, we didn't know, blah, blah, blah. Which is interesting because I just thought of that as trying to make a comparison between kind of like art made to make a point and art made to just entertain people, the Puppet Combo stuff, who he just kind of churns out redundant sometimes. Like he'll use the same mechanics from game to game, but it's just different scenarios of horror games. And again, that's because they're for different audiences, or different tastes at the time. Plenty of video game audiences play all kinds of things. It just depends on what they want to do. That is probably what's cool about video games, and also then what's annoying is because then people just buy whatever. I hate sports video. I like the old sports games. I like playing those on the Sega Genesis, like NHL 94 that my grandparents had, which I played probably too much, like a couple thousand hours of 94 and 97. And 97 looks so much better than 94 as far as graphics. 94 is like straight just pixels, but whatever. The difference between those things isn't really that much, I don't think, because just talking about it now, it's kind of a cheap, as far as in Spec Ops The Line, it's kind of a cheap, what's the fucking word I'm trying to think of? It's a tactic. It's something, or it's something included. It's a cheap way of just going, yeah, you thought you were the good guys, but you're actually not fully good guys. You can do bad stuff too. And it goes on from there and it gets worse. Okay. I mean, I liked it. It was cool. I wouldn't play it again, probably. Just because it's not that entertaining. The point of it is to have this message, which I get wanting to make that and being like, we're not going to compromise on this. But it's also not that hard of a thing to make. I think it came out during Bush. I can't imagine. Well, yeah, no, I think it came out during Bush. I'm not sure. It might have come out during Obama. But just making a statement, or even going back to books, having a personal flair, it's all still commercializing what you think of as art, at least. Like, I'll say my stuff is shit, but I also don't want other people to say it is. I consider it expression and creativity. And because it's my ideas on a page, even if it's virtual, if somebody says something bad about it, I feel like I'm being attacked. And I like to think I'm good about that, but I also don't share it that much. I share it with strangers online. Which is probably the only good thing the internet's for, is just sharing yourself with strangers online. But whatever it is, it's not like it's a pure expression or whatever. So just do whatever, make puppet combo games where you're just making one scenario after another with horror themes, or do something where, oh, well, I'm expressing myself and I'm making a point. So, yeah, I feel like I've said everything I've said in this multiple times before, but again, I didn't feel like talking about being worried about dying again, because that might even be worse than whatever this was. But again, check out eToro at youmeandbtc.com/trade. Thank them for sponsoring us, and come back whenever I do another one of these. Again, like I said, I kind of told Daniel I'd do them every 2 weeks. I don't know if I actually ever said that. That definitely started whatever this rant was. But I should be coming up more regularly, just for the fact of not losing people. Like, if I can kind of snare you in, I might as well, because eventually you'll give me money. I just have to wear you down. Alright, bye.